Hi guys, my name is Sophie Farrow, and I will be doing my final ANSI 431 project, the farm plan, on a Hereford Angus cow-calf operation. It's going to be located in the southwestern United States. So just a quick overview of the farm. The name of it is going to be COW Farms. It's going to be a small family-owned Hereford Angus cow-calf operation located in Pojoaque, New Mexico. It's going to be in like the southern central portion of the state. I have a couple maps above there. This is going to be owned by myself. It's going to be primarily family operated with a couple third-party outside help. But the farm includes about 500 acres of land, and this is going to be about 490 acres of pasturable acres. The farm at any given time is going to contain about 200 to 220 animals yearly, and it's going to be a primarily grass-fed operation that relies on Bermuda grasses, ryegrass, and fescue. So just a quick overview of the region. So New Mexico already sits at a pretty high elevation. Pojoaque is going to be a little bit higher than the rest of the state. So our farm is going to sit in an elevation about 1,785 meters above sea level with an average rainfall at about 14 inches per year and 24 inches of snow per year. So the average winter temperature is approximately 8 degrees Celsius, and summer temperatures usually average between 30 and 31 degrees Celsius. So as we can see here, this is going to be categorized by a relatively mild, cool climate with heavy drought conditions, but this dry, arid climate is ideal for growth of fescue grasses. All of our water is solar pumped from the Pojoaque River, and this is actually fed by the Rio Grande, so it stays running most years. So I found a couple of pictures of farms for sale in this area off of Zillow. So these are pretty accurate depictions of what it would probably look like. But we're going to have 4 pastures consisting of 112 and a half acres used for rotational grazing. And this is going to contain 10 paddocks each, just for breeding organization as well as rotational grazing. So we're going to have a 15 stall tie stall barn. This is going to contain 2 head gate systems, optimal for maternity shedding and veterinary work. And then we're also going to have an indoor isolation facility that's attached to that. This is going to be for sick animals or animals that are entering into our herd that don't originate from our herd. So this is also going to include 50 acres of non-pasture land, and this is going to be used for premium hay cultivation and as well as our soybean cultivation. So just an overview of the pasture land, just a little bit more on what this area is actually going to look like. So again, we're going to include 490 acres of pasture land. This is going to be 440 acres for grazing rotation and 50 acres for crop cultivation. Approximately 220 acres of Bermuda grass and ryegrass with an average yield of 21,500 pounds per acre per year. We're going to have 200 acres of fescue with an average yield of 15,500 pounds per acre per year. And the average yield of both pastures is going to be about 10,500 pounds per acre. I calculated all of this using the University of Nebraska Lincoln. I believe it was like the cow-calf pasture organization tool. So finding this, we only utilized about 350 acres of pasture during one given grazing period. Since we live in a pretty heavily droughted region, we have to allow for the land to sit fallow for a little bit longer than we would typically, just so we can allow some of that moisture and soil nutrients to come back. So if our farm maintains 200 animals at a time, we can provide about 1.7 acres per animal with this amount of land. This will obviously go down if we have more calves, but the USDA typically suggests about 1.5 acres, so we have a little bit of legroom. So our herd operation, as we said before, is typically going to maintain 200 to 220 animals. This is going to be dependent on the seasonal period, like if we just did a huge calf sale, or also if we have a high pregnancy rate, and then also high calving and weaning rate. So all animals are going to be Angus Hereford crosses. These are quality breeds for maternal ability and milk production. And they're also super hardy breeds, which is going to be useful if we're going to have them primarily out at pasture. So the example inventory that we would typically have would include 90 mature cows, 15 first calf heifers, and about 100 calves. So we'll plan on breeding about 115 animals yearly. This is with a hopeful 92% pregnancy rate. We will go with a national average of about 3.5 mortality rate for cows and about 3% mortality rate for our calves. The predicted weanings rates of our mature cows is going to be right around 86% and 82% for our first calvers, which will again equate to about 100 calves weaned per year. So our reproduction program is going to be completely AI based, and it's going to be a two-breed rotational cross system with a 60-35 and 35-65 stabilizing ratio. This diagram to the left, this is from Future Beef. I think it's a really great diagram of how we're going to use two different bull breeds. So the diagram, again, represents this rotational cross system where breed B is going to be our Hereford cows, our Hereford sires, and then breed A is going to be our Angus sires. Oh, and then I will say too, for continuing cycles after, we actually won't be using any more purebred animals either, just because we're hoping to, again, stabilize at that 60-35 vice versa ratio. So anyway, our selection of replacement heifers, we're going to primarily be looking a lot at disposition. So we're going to call any flighty, aggressive, or nervous animals by immediate handling and assessment of animals at weaning. We'll go a little bit more into this when we go into details regarding our herd health management program. But in any case, continuing, so we'll also look at the birth quality. So was it an easy birth? Was it an assisted birth? Was it a difficult birth? What symptoms of dystocia were arise, etc. And then also the type of birth. So we're going to try to avoid twins and triplets, specifically triplets, and probably twins too, just to avoid any infertility issues. And then we're also going to do weights at 30, 60, 90, and 120-day weights. This is to ensure proper suckling and weight gain. And then we're also going to look at quality feet and leg structure, specifically because we are going to be a pasture-based program. So we're going to call any animals with foot or leg deformities. This is going to reduce instance of genetic inheritance for future progeny. And then we're going to avoid blocky or large leg builds, which may indicate an endocrine disorder specifically for our heifers. We'll also really look at fleshing ability, cull any extremely thin animals. This might be hard at weaning, but can be evaluated in the winters this season to estimate if that heifer has enough fat to be bred. We'll also get a decent idea of this using those 30, 60, 90, and 120-day weights too. We'll cull any animals that are just obviously not getting any weight post calving. So we'll also look at sound udder structure, quick shedding ability, and adequate pelvis size. We'll do this via veterinary palpation. So for our bull selection, we are going to use a Hereford cow and an Angus, or Hereford sire and an Angus sire. So we will be purchasing these semen samples from Select Sires Incorporated, and then Ulrich Farms. These will be frozen and shipped. And the selection is going to be completely based from EPD values and if veterinarians report normal BSCs. So aiming for progeny ultimately that exemplify less assisted births, heavier birth weights, and heavier weaning weights. So we'll be looking at the EPD values of the calving ease, the birth weight, and the weaning weight values. So for our Hereford sire, I actually found some real life cows that we'll be using. So this is going to be SHF Foresight. This is all based off the Hereford.org website. They have some really, really awesome information about current animal EPDs and how much certain straws cost. So in any case, looking at this guy's EPD, he's going to obviously exemplify progeny with far heavier weaning weights than the national average. He's also polled. And then the larger birth weight and quality calving ease value indicate that he would work out really, really well in our pasture-based program. So I have the average EPDs on 2018 bull sales based on Hereford cows below. And then if you look at SHF Foresight, his CE, his BW, and his WW are going to be a little bit higher than that. So our Angus sire, he's from Select Sires, which I believe is, they have a program here in Minnesota as well. So I've actually been to their stockyard and it's pretty cool, but they do a lot of really awesome reproductive work. So in any case, we're going to be using SAV Graze Max. This is all based on the Angus.org website. He's going to be a black Angus. He's also polled. And he has quality materning wean calf values. So we looked primarily at the S values for this guy, which is primarily necessary for a system that relies on replacement females. So for furthering our reproduction, more on the cow side, this is the estrus synchronization method that we're going to use. We'll be using the 14-day CIDR PG system. This is just because it has really high accuracy and efficacy. And we actually will be hiring personnel from Select Sires to come out and deliver and do the AI program using the traditional gun technique. This is so we know that trained professionals are completing it, which will hopefully increase our conception rate. And then we will be having veterinary palpations completed by a DVM at day 35 and 55 post breeding. And any open animals will be culled, and pregnant cows will be placed in pens, respective to what sire they were bred with. So our feeding plan, I primarily used the Clemson Feed Ration Calculator software program. This was really great because I was able to implement sort of the harvested feeds that we have on our ranch. So this is going to be our winter ration. During the summer and spring and part of the fall months, they'll be grazing, so we won't necessarily need a ration. Um, but in any case, I have the printout right here. So in any case, our ration is going to rely heavily on our high forage pastures that support the growth of Bermuda grass and fescue. Um, and this is going to be supplemented with the primarily forage-based diet. Since it does have a very low crude protein value, we will be supplementing this with dry soybean meal. I know we were supposed to go a little bit into the differences between grain-fed and grass-fed beef. My operation is sort of neither, but also both. It's going to be primarily grass-fed, but because of the low crude protein values in our Bermuda and fescue grasses, we also have to unfortunately supplement with the soybean meal as our grain supplement. So just to go over kind of the different trends relating to these different types of operations. We see that currently with social media in particular, it's actually persuading the public, more so in like urban areas, to shop for pasture raised product, which allows our cows a forage based diet. And this sets our company apart from fully grain fed operations in a grocery store setting. So, with this sort of labeling system, we can sell our products at a higher price than conventional alternatives. But we also have that soybean meal, which kind of maximizes the growth efficiency. So although we aren't fully grass fed and we can't fully market at the grass fed level, we're also not grain fed and therefore can kind of cater to both demand areas. So this ultimately allows for better marketing opportunity that is in support of modern trends, pointing people in the direction of pasture raised beef. But we can also allocate our product to customers that can't necessarily afford premium price for grass fed and organic beef. So the pros of our grass-fed operation is ultimately health related. We're trying to avoid rumen acidosis, and this typically stems from a high grain diet. And we actually do not have to rely on out-of-state or third-party feed sales, which in turn saves a lot of money from transportation costs, shipping, sales tax. In my feed section of my paper, I actually have calculated out how much it would cost us to actually purchase all of our feedstuffs versus grow all of our feedstuffs, and including estimations based on government subsidies, tax breaks, etc. We can actually cut that price in about 1/4, so down to 25%. And then feeding in a primarily grazed system requires considerably less labor, and then also sorting is avoided. So if you're giving cows, I come from a dairying background, so sorting is a huge issue, especially with TMR. Cows don't necessarily get all the nutrients they need because they tend to pick out the things that they like. So that's going to be completely avoided in a grazing system. And we can also emphasize welfare and marketing, which is also becoming a massive trend, especially in the younger population, who in return is willing to pay a higher price for cows that are raised in a pasture-like setting. So the cons of our grass-fed operation, these are pretty vast as well. The only reason why we're doing grass-fed operation is primarily for marketing reasons, just because it requires considerably more land than a feedlot. The common conception is that grass-fed beef is a lot more ecologically friendly. This is simply not the case, just because the cows are alive for a lot longer and they acquire a lot more land. And then also land is also really heavily grazed upon, which damages critical habitat in the turn. So um, with that too, it's also significantly less efficient weaning to finishing growth time, as we were talking about before. The cows are alive a lot longer, and ultimately we can consider labor, operational cost. More time for a cow to reach the finishing stage is going to be a lot more expensive. In our case, the more time it takes a cow to reach the weaning stage. So it's also impossible to accurately calculate individual or herd feed intake in a grass-fed production system. And then veterinary work and herd handling is going to be considerably a lot more complex. The consumption of high forage diets also contribute to, again, back to the climate change situation. we're going to produce a lot more methane on a high forage diet. So I used, again, I think that this was the OSU feed ration calculator program. But this was really, really great because I was able to input the feed that I was going to use, and then kind of just looked up average cost for the area of how much it would cost for me to purchase the feeds instead of grow the feeds. So combining this, so this is going to be the cost per pound of feed consumed for both soybean meal, Bermuda grass, and fescue. So combining that is going to be about 0.445 American dollars per pound of feed consumed. So if we use our total feed estimate of 400 tons per year, this was also calculated using the OSU calculator. I did this based on how much our first calving heifers were going to consume, how much our mature cows were going to consume, and how much our calves were going to consume, with a preferred daily gain rate, as well as pregnancy terms. So that's going to be all in my paper as well. But I calculated that out to be about 400 tons needed per year. And using this 0.445 dollar amount, we can estimate about $355,000 a year. To support this ration mix. So that's obviously really expensive. Luckily, we grow these products, so we can estimate about a 25% of this is actually what we're going to be paying, also calculating in that tax break and government subsidy. So we'll be calculating about $89,000 a year, which I believe calculates out to be about $445 per animal per year, which is still extremely expensive. So we also will be doing a calf creep feeding program. We do a lot of creep feeding in dairy cows, and in my opinion, it helps transition into a wean calf. So ultimately, I think this will work really, really well in our cow calf program because it allows faster rate of gain and easier transitioning for our calves. So one thing that we use at the University of Minnesota is the Lone Star Premium Calf Creep Pellets, and this also includes Bobatech. This prevents cows against coccidiosis, which is actually really, really common in New Mexico. And then the creep feed will be given ad lib from 2 months to 4 months. Cows probably won't start consuming it until 3 months old, just because their rumen can only digest it at about 2 months. So, but again, it kind of transfers them from that suckling stage to the dry stage. So our feed plan overview, again, is going to remain primarily on grass-fed, forage-based diet, but will also be supplemented with soybean meal as an extra source of crude protein. This helps increase our rate of gain, and then also we can provide a marketing strategy that attracts various consumers. So during the seasonal months where Bermuda grass and fescue grows, animals will graze, and then in the winter, forages are provided as stockpiled forages. So into our herd health management, the goal is to ensure that animals in our operation meet highest industry standards for animal welfare and food safety. This is also to meet consumer demand for safe and well-raised food products. And the use of AI breeding is kind of one of our top healthcare initiatives. And this is ultimately going to prevent venereal diseases as well as reduce labor risk on maintaining bulls. It also keeps our stock really isolated. So we also have an intensive vaccination program that targets calf immunity even before the calf is born. And we are going to put a lot of emphasis on low stress procedures surrounding focal stress points. So our vaccination program was actually developed. This is pretty much an exact replica of what Texas A&M beef program uses, but just going back to our lectures in class, these should cover all the different diseases that were mentioned. So I won't read all of them, but we are going to begin with pre-breeding vaccination program for replacement heifers, and this is going to be 3 to 6 weeks before breeding. We're also going to be doing a pre-calving vaccination program for cows and heifers at 8 months pregnancy. This is going to be twice a year. And then we do focus on post-calving vaccinations for nursing calves. This is going to occur at 2 to 3 months of age, and then pre-weaning vaccination of nursing calves, which will occur 3 weeks prior to weaning. And then we are going to do a really heavily pregnancy calf-based vaccination program. This prioritizes calf immunity even before the calf is born. These are all going to be Zoetis products. So all this information is based on the Zoetis website. So our calving vaccination program will prioritize Zoetis products, and this is going to maximize herd immunity even before our calves are born. So we'll be using the Enforce 3 vaccine, the Bova Shield Gold, and the Scour Guard. I believe most of these are given during pregnancy, so before the calf is born. So the calf processing, all intermuscular injections will be placed in the neck area. This is obviously to avoid any issues with the carcass. And then we're going to select for polled animals, but in the event of horn calf, horns will be removed using a hot iron and lidocaine at 2 weeks of age. The younger, the better, and the use of lidocaine also reduces stress. So castration of low quality male calves will be done using the banding method. This is pretty low labor, and this will be placed at birth to minimize pain. And the absolute most valuable thing is reducing tetanus risk. And then branding will occur at 3 weeks of age, and this will occur in pasture. So the daily, weekly, monthly health management schedule, typically we're going to do monthly veterinary visits. This will be scheduled to help assess body condition scoring of animals at various production stages. And then we will also have a monthly veterinarian that will complete palpations of both open and pregnant animals to assess reproductive ability. So this includes progression of CL, pregnancy concerns, and then maybe we can check on any animals that are exemplifying ketotic symptoms. So, and then we will also be doing biweekly body condition scoring by the staff members. So just going through the pastures and looking at animals if they haven't moved or if they're looking really lethargic. And then we'll also be doing education for all of our staff workers and operators. This is going to be surrounding the beef quality assurance certification. And we'll also make sure that there's a lot of emphasis on understanding symptoms, when to call a vet, and when to euthanize. So a lot of our health initiative program is going to look at reducing stress in high stress events. So these events will include calving time, breeding time, vaccination time, weaning time, and extreme weather conditions. So to make these events as low stress as possible, I'm just going to move me here. So we're going to do pasture bursts and indoor isolation stalls for dystocia. So pasture bursts pretty much allow really, really natural calving behaviors. This includes nesting, pawing, and isolation from other cows. If we do have a cow that is struggling, we will bring them into an indoor isolation stall, and these will actually have cameras on them. So we don't necessarily need to be in the room, but we can monitor a little bit closer. We will also be doing familiarization of human handling, specifically halter breaking. We do this at the University of Minnesota. All of our calves are actually halter broke. And I think that this helps a lot for labor purposes. It also greatly decreases labor time involved with working with the animals. And then we'll also be pushing animals through the head gate systems at just 1 week of age. We also will be doing a really slow weaning process. So this is ease of separation. We will keep calves in the same weaning pen. The weaning pen won't move. They'll stay in the same position throughout their weaning period. And then once they get a little bit closer to weaning time, we'll have fence line contact with the mom. Mom can stay for a while, but they actually will just not be able to suckle. And then eventually, once the calf needs to be fully weaned, we'll keep the calf in the same area, but we'll move the mom to a different area. And then also the addition of creep feed familiarizes animals with eating dry matter without making this massive transition from milk to the ration. And then, of course, we'll have to call animals with a low body condition score prior to the winter season. So into our marketing plan, this is kind of just an overview of how many cows we'll have in stock. So in terms of selling animals, most calves will be sold to the Union County feedlot in Clayton, New Mexico. This is the largest feedlot in the state. And this is going to be done at about 7 months of age or whenever 30 days post weaning is. And then we will actually have quality bulls that we won't castrate. These can be sold as breeding stock, and then heifers sold as bred. These can be auctioned live at Southwest Livestock Auction in Las Lunas. Hopefully we'll gain a little bit more money from these animals. So I used the cow-calf profitability calculator from the University of Oklahoma. I just implemented all of our predicted animal inventory. So as you can see here, we have 114 cows. Unfortunately, we had kind of a low pregnancy rate that year, so we only had 105, which honestly isn't that bad. And then number of mortalities, 4. We had to cull 5 animals, and then we replaced those 5 animals with replacement heifers. And then we sold 45 heifer calves. These were sold as bred, 52 male calves sold, and then number of calves weaned in total was 102. So using these numbers, we didn't have to pay for any replacement heifers just because we replaced them from our own herd. So again, we went through all those sales, and then just basically implemented price per pound, our average weights, and then our price received per head, and then the weights. Using these numbers, then we could do income predictions. So these are actually our overall percentage rate. So again, we had the 92% pregnancy rate, that 3.5 cow mortality. That's pretty typical. Calf mortality is 2.8 or about 3, and then a cull rate of 4%. So we actually have expected calvings next year of 101, which stays pretty close to our expected calves of about 100. And then we only have a 98% of those, or 98 of those calves are going to be fully weaned. So calculating that out, our total income is going to be about 281,400 per year. This is without any operational costs. So the net profit of our breeding season, again, we will have to include labor costs, slaughter fees, and the beef checkoff program. This checkoff program is typically, I looked up, it's about $1 per head. So if we predict that each cow will include about a $20 to $30 slaughter fee, this will get paid to the feedlot or the livestock auction that we sell our cows at. We must gauge between about 2,500,000, or excuse me, 2,500 to 3,000, and this will be set aside for kill costs. Our laborers, we're only going to have 3 of them, but they will be paid $15 hourly, and then they each work part-time at estimated 24 hours per week, and this equates to about $56,000 a year allocation to funds for labor. Our breeding costs, this was a little bit complicated because you never know exactly how much you're going to spend on a veterinarian. But our semen straws are going to be about $16 each. This is just the average between how much it costs between those two sires that I had in previous slides. This is going to be about $14 too, including the cider protocol. So about $30 per cow. So breeding will be predicted at about 2,500. And then including veterinary costs, we'll probably plan for between 6,000 and 700. I think 6,000 is kind of on the lower side, but so I also did machinery costs. We will be needing a combine. So we can estimate the purchase price to be about 160,000. So we can expect an annual 23,000 a year ownership cost, including this, and about 21,500 operating costs, which probably equates to about $43,000 a year. So it's going to be super expensive. And then we can also expect to spend approximately 90,000 a year on feeding costs, or an estimated 445 per cow per year. So with these costs combined, we can expect a net income about 82,000 for 2023. This is just the cow calf operational cost. So this doesn't include any taxes, transportation, property taxes, things like that. So our overall SWOT analysis of the farm plan is we have quite a few strengths. So because we are a primarily grass-fed operation with low feed input costs, aside from occasional winter hay supplementation, all of this is grown on property. So that's going to ultimately be a lot cheaper as if we had to buy and ship it. We have a relatively low labor pasture calving program, and we have maximized efforts to reduce manure waste via bedding and hay cultivation. So we'll actually be using most of our manure to fertilize the soil. And we also have a generating system that kills bacteria in some of the manure. We can use that for bedding in our tie stall. We also have a rotational crossbreeding program, which utilizes 2 very maternal breeds that offer calving ease, high birth weights, and high weaning weights. And then also maximizes to the percentage that we can. I think it's about 67% heterosis. So we also maintain a pretty mild climate, just because it's a relatively cool summer and a relatively mild winter, which then reduce weather-related labor efforts, management, and then hopefully cow mortality. And then we have enough grazable land to allow land to remain fallow for a prolonged period of time. And this allows for a little bit more nutrient regrowth before we regraze that area of land. And then our AI program eliminates danger and costs associated with owning a bull. Our weaknesses, there's a lot of those too. We are located in a drought region where water might not be super sustainable. Our 2-breed rotation does not maximize heterosis as much as it could. And then we have high birth weights, which may induce dystocia. We don't have that many laborers. We're pretty much completely family operated. And transportation needed to bring animals to and from feedlot and auction also might be another expense. We do also have relatively high veterinary costs, specifically because we have an AI program. We have a very high machinery operational cost associated with the combine needed to harvest all of our food. And we're completely dependent on feedlot or our auctioneer for our funding. And then we also have a way too high feed estimate of about $445 per cow per year. Um, it would be optimal if we were spending about 200,000. So we're about double over what we should be spending. Um, so continued, we do have quite a few opportunities. We have a large acreage plot, which will allow for increase in herd size in future years. Our AI program suggests that we will have future genetic advancements. We can also tweak our genetics based on what consumer demand is. And then there is a super large consumer demand for beef in New Mexico, which then implies good marketing availability and then opportunity to expand our brand name. And then because we are primarily pasture raised, we don't rely on any antibiotics right now except for the feed Bobatech. We're hoping to pursue an organic certification just for marketing reasons. And then our threats to our company, there's not that many, but they're pretty big ones, is there are a lot larger operations in the surrounding areas. I think the average farm size for New Mexico is about 1,400 acres, so triple the size of our operation. Obviously, drought's going to be a huge one. That's devastating most of the Southwest, and it's really heavily, in some cases, probably most heavily affecting ranchers in that area. And we're not affiliated with any top corporate beef companies, although it really would be nice to eventually maybe partner with Cargill or Tyson. So our overall farm or New Mexico outlook, ultimately, the ranching industry in the state of New Mexico is a very vital piece of the historical and economic construction of the entire region, which is why it's a really great place to establish a farm. With the current phase of climate change so heavily apparent in the state of New Mexico, the drying force of each season requires farmers in this region to adapt quickly in harsh, arid conditions. And while this may seem like a bad thing, I believe that the new ideas regarding irrigation, crop rotation, grazing, manure usage, and overall resource conservation will create an incredibly diverse system that can ultimately be resistant and resilient in almost any environment. So I appreciate you listening to this super, super long lecture, and I hope you liked my future farm plans.